Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be doing a little presentation for you on intonation, talk about what intonation means and why it's important. And you can see our names down there at the bottom. We've got a great group of people here, a lot of different instruments, and we're really excited to get going and talk to you guys about intonation and how it's beneficial. Oh. All right. So, what is intonation? So, first off, intonation is the accuracy of your pitch, or in other words, like kind of how high or low a note is in reference to A440. And we'll get to that term A440 in just a minute if you're not familiar with it. So, the concept of like when you play any note, like just take a concert F for example, that doesn't mean that it's just going to magically be the exact concert F, just the right pitch. It's just going to come out perfectly. Because we have this concept of like being in tune, you could be sharp, which means your pitch is a little higher than it should be, or flat, meaning that it's a little lower than it could be. And what this is all about is just sound waves and how frequently the sound waves are oscillating. So if you look at this visual on the slide, you can see two different sound waves. And as you can see, those sound waves aren't lined up. Now, if you have two people to play a concert F, you want their sound waves to line up perfectly, which means that their sound waves are oscillating at the same rates. One isn't going faster than the other, one's not slower than the other, they just line up perfectly. But these aren't lined up perfectly. One is going a little bit slower than the other, and the one that's slower is flatter. So in other words, I know that was kind of complicated, but when multiple players are performing the same note, just think a concert F, if one is slightly sharper or flatter than the other, then it's going to be out of tune and your intonation is going to be bad. Intonation is all about how your different sound waves are interacting with each other and how that affects the sound of your performance. Alright, so now Ian is going to talk to us about what is that term A440 I just said. Ian, take it away.
Thanks, Eric. So you started to explain it pretty well. The pitch that we produce with our instruments is physically, it comes out in the form of sound waves. And when our sound waves line up, it sounds good. And when they don't line up, you hear waves and it sounds bad. Now, we have to define how we're going to tune our instruments so that we can all line up with the same basic standard. And that's where A440 comes in. A refers to the pitch A below middle C. And 440 means the number of waves in that sound that happen in each second. So that means if we tune to A440, then when we play the note A, we'll get 440 waves per second, or 440 hertz will be the level of our sound. And that's what most orchestras and in general, when people are playing together, that's what we like to tune to because it sounds the best to our ears. That's what we tune pianos to as well. There are some orchestras and symphonies around the world that tune to different pitches, but the general standard nowadays is to tune to A440.
Alright, thank you, Ian. So now we're going to go on to why intonation is important. I know all of that stuff about sound waves and A440, that may have been the first time you heard this. So if it didn't all make sense, just understand that intonation is about tuning, and are you playing the correct note with other people's correct note, or is one of you slightly sharper or flatter than the other? And we'll get to some examples in just a second. So first of all, why is all this kind of intonation stuff important? And we're going to have Emma, Roman, and Andrew talking to us about why intonation is important. Take it away, guys.
So, besides intonation being one of the first aspects that an audience member actually hears of your playing, it is essential to performing the music how the composer intended it. The composer is hearing when composing all of this music in tune. He does not imagine, or he or she does not imagine their composition in an out of tune fashion. They want it in tune so that the music they wrote can actually be performed and come across the way they intended it to be. So right away, intonation is of utmost importance to performing well.
It really makes things sound more lively, and it blends well with an ensemble when you have everyone playing how the most beautiful chords that you can play and the most beautiful sounds of your instrument blending with the ensemble is just, it creates something better than just playing by yourself.
Yeah, so even though learning to adjust your pitch using this concept that we just learned about called intonation, um, over time it becomes more and more rewarding because you're able to make wonderful, really great music with a lot of other really great musicians because you all have wonderful intonation. So keep practicing, you guys can do it. Yay.
All right, thanks, guys. So now Roman, Emma, and Andrew, and also Ian have made some videos for you guys of what it sounds like to be out of tune. So there are different ways you can be out of tune. So Roman, can you talk about what it's like to be out of tune with yourself?
Yes. So even if you're playing alone and not having to worry about your sound waves lining up with someone else's sound waves, it's still very much important to be playing in tune. The audience will very clearly be able to hear a difference, as you yourselves will hear from this short video, in what it sounds like to play in tune, and because it's not just about one note at a time, it's notes relative to each other, and that'll be seen and heard through this video example.
Hey, Eric, I don't think we can actually hear the video.
All right, let's try it again. Sorry, guys.
Hello, I'm Roman Holden, and today I will be demonstrating the importance of being in tune with oneself through a couple of examples. See if you can hear which example is in tune and which example is out of tune. Did you hear the difference?
Well, I hope y'all could hear the difference because that was a pretty noticeable difference. And now Ian has made a video for us that's demonstrating what it's like when you're out of tune with someone else, not just yourself.
You ready? Yep. Whoa, dude, you're super quiet. Whoa, now you're really sharp. Nice.
Yes, thank you. So there are some more examples of what it's like when you're out of tune. So hopefully you guys could hear how it sounds bad when you are not in tune, which is why it's very important to have good intonation. Now, we've got some more videos for you. So Emma, do you want to talk about the two videos that you made for us?
Yeah, so we're just kind of going off of that first example you heard with playing in tune with another person. I have two examples of that, and what we're going to do is listen to both of these and see if you can hear a difference internally before we start talking about it.
All right, let's do the first example. Well, Emma, that definitely sounded interesting. Let's try the second one. See if the intonation is better.
Let's move on to the second.
That sounded like a pretty big difference, Emma. All right, now,
Yeah.
sorry, do you have
Sorry.
something else to say?
Oh yeah, no, just think about that difference whenever you're playing in tune with other people. We don't want to hear anything crunchy like the first example, so really think about that when you're playing with other groups of people and really listen to each other while we're doing that.
All right, thank you. Now, Andrew, our tuba player, has made 2 other videos of intonation just to trying to reinforce the idea this does matter and to give you guys some examples of what it sounds like when someone is out of tune. Andrew, do you want to talk about your videos?
Yeah, so my videos are just based upon two people playing together in just a warm up fashion. So uh, just going down chromatically, a little short excerpt there, and you should be able to tell the difference from one and the other, hopefully.
All right, let's listen to the videos. And the second one? All right, thank you, Andrew, for making those videos for us. So I hope you guys could hear the examples of how some just sound better than others. And it's like one person is almost just playing the wrong notes, and that's because of intonation. And just remember, intonation takes a while to work out. So don't get frustrated if this sounds like you. Just calm down. It is a work in progress. Intonation is a slow battle, but it's a very important battle, as you just heard. All right, now we're going to talk about some instrument-specific adjustments, and everyone here is, well, we have the names up there, is going to do a little thing on specific instrument adjustment. So I'm already talking, so I'll go first. Now, for flutes, down there, there's a little synopsis that we got from a flute player on adjusting. So when you're tuning with an ensemble, or like a certain tuning note, maybe a B flat or an A, depending on your band, you need to adjust the head joint, which means pull it out if you're sharp, push it in if it's flat. For more minor adjustments while you're playing, like if you're playing and you hear some bad intonation, you can roll the flute inward a little bit if it's sharp, and roll it out a little bit if it's flat. Again, that's roll inward if sharp, roll outwards if flat. Generally speaking, your upper register, like a lot of those high notes, are going to be very sharp, and the lower register is going to be very flat. So when you're playing softly, the flute tends to go flat, and when you're super loud, it tends to get sharp. So those are things to keep in mind, that if you know you've got a high note coming up, maybe go ahead and roll out just a little bit to try to compensate for the intonation. Now for clarinets, when you're doing your tuning note, the first thing you need to adjust is like on just a concert F, like your open G is the barrel. So you can adjust the barrel and the upper joint by pushing in and out. You need to push in if you're flat and pull out if you're sharp. And then clarinets, you can also check with your C above the register, your thumb 1 2 1 2 3 pinky, that C just above the register. Play that note, and if you're sharp on that note, then you need to pull out between the upper joint and the lower joint. So pull out right in the middle of the clarinet. And clarinets, if you are flat on a note, think about tightening your corners. Don't bite with your jaw. Do not apply jaw pressure to make a note go up. But think about having tight and firm embouchure, tight lips, not a tight jaw. And, sorry. Okay, so tight lip, not tight jaw. And if you're sharp, think about just kind of opening up a little bit. Oh. All right, so Sergio, take it away for saxophone.
All right, so on the saxophone, um, really the biggest thing is staying in tune with yourself. When we play scales with ourselves and others, it's a lot about voicing. So using like opening up your throat or the shape of your tongue to change the notes, the pitch of the notes, so making them more flat or sharp when you're playing with others. And then when it comes to specific intonation problems, the saxophone has quite a bit of alternate fingerings that you can use to change the pitch of certain notes. Some fingerings can be very flat and some can be incredibly sharp. So we usually use a lot of those alternate fingerings to change that for individual notes.
All right, thank you, Sergio. Emma, can you take it away on double reed adjustment?
Yeah, thanks. Double reed adjustment is a lot different from all of the other instruments up there, mainly because we can't adjust by physically pulling out the reed or the vocal, which means that we have to come up with other ways to adjust to the ensemble that we are playing with at the time. So if you are playing bassoon or another member of the oboe family, the English horn, they have something called a bocal. And a bocal is the piece of metal is that piece of metal that you stick the reed on. What you can do is if you look at the bottom near the cork, there's a number, and you can adjust that number to make your instrument longer or shorter, because those are different sizes of vocals, so you can use those to adjust to your personal embouchure. A lot of it is reeds, vocals, and instruments. So if you are out of tune, you would have to change either your reed or your vocal. There's not really a formula to tell which reeds are sharp or flat based on the way that they look. What you can do though is just practice with a tuner on that reed, find the tendency of that, and adjust accordingly. What you can do in minor situations, like if you're in the middle of playing and you're like, oh, E is really sharp on the oboe. What you can do is you can make your, like, let's pretend that we are playing an E and it's really sharp. What you can do is you can make your instrument shorter by rolling your oboe reed into your lip just a tiny, tiny bit. Make sure that we are not biting the reed when we're doing that. Make space between your teeth, and a lot of it is based on air pressure. Yeah, especially for bassoon, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you, Emma. George, can you explain how to adjust some intonation things on the trumpet? And then we'll go to Sam for French horn and Ian and Sawyer for low brass.
Sure. So for trumpet, there's a few things that that are like characteristic of that, but also some of it can be applied to other brass instruments. So one of the basic things is that the more valves that you push down, generally the sharper the combination will be. So like there are certain combinations that are meant to be in tune. So like open, second, first, and second and third, like those, like if you play them naturally, they should be in tune. Like the first thing you should do is like adjust like your main tuning slide. But with first and second, first and third, and first, second, and third, those are going to tend to want to be sharper. So for those, you want to adjust using your tuning slides for your first and your third valves. But like in general, your main tuning slide should not be. It should be somewhere between like 1 to 2 centimeters out of the instrument. If it's any less or any more, it might be something like that you might have to adjust like with your embouchure.
All right, thank you, George. Sam, can you take us away on the French horn?
Yeah, so the horn has a lot of different ways to tune. And a little bit of what George was saying, your main tuning note, which you'll tune in a band or an orchestra, will be a B flat or an A. Those are going to be open on both instruments, so you won't have to put any valves down. But the main setup that you have for tuning is your oral shape, and that is like an aw shape in your mouth. To manipulate the intonation while playing, you can manipulate your lips and your oral shape. Before you're playing, you can manipulate the tuning, like the tubes, like George was saying. On the horn, you have a lot of tubes. You have so many tubes. So that is kind of something you want to mess with before you're playing to be in tune. But if you need to be in tune while you're playing, you can actually do something that's horn specific. We actually use our hands in our bell like this. And if you need it to go flat, you can just curl your hand in. And if you need it to go a little sharper, you can straighten it out. And lastly, there are so many alternate fingerings on horn. There's at least two for every single note, and a lot of notes have three alternate fingerings as well. So finding what will work in the moment and with others is really important.
All right, thank you, Sam. And last but not least, Ian and Sawyer, can you talk to us about low brass?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I play the trombone, and trombone is pretty unique in that our whole instrument is itself a tuning slide. So all the intonation problems that you might experience are essentially just you have to rely on your ears. So if you sound like you're a little bit sharp, you can simply pull out the slide. And likewise, if you sound like you're flat, you can pull in the slide towards you. Now, the one caveat is if you're all the way in first position to where you can't pull in anymore, we do have a tuning slide as well that we use. So that's when you want to pull that out. But as long as your tuning slide is relatively close to being where you need it to be, everything else is just where you place the slide. Sawyer.
For tuba and euphonium, it's basically a lot like all the other brass instruments, aside from, of course, trombone. But your main thing is going to be the tuning slide, your main tuning slide. If you really need to adjust something like a lot before you play, but you can use your mouth to change different pitches, and of course, there's the alternate fingerings for tuba and euphonium as well to help with pitches on certain notes.
All right, thank you guys. So now we're going to go on to equal temperament and just temperament. So George and Sergio, can you talk to us about playing with others as far as like listening and anticipating the third and the fifth?
Sure. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go.
All right. So the main difference between equal temperament and just intonation is, I guess, for equal temperament, think of the way like a piano keyboard. Like there's 12 notes. They're all equally apart, but they're also all equally out of tune. Like the waves, like with equal temperament, like the harmonic series isn't exactly lined up. It's just like slightly off. And that's like fine for piano and stuff. But with just intonation, like there's like some notes that you have to adjust if you want to like get the waves out of it. Like, and that's something that's like important, like within, playing a wind instrument or something. So with the third, you'll want to lower it slightly. And with the fifth, you'll want to raise it even less, so that the waves kind of disappear and it just sounds like one solid block of sound.
All right, thank you. And Sergio, do you have some comments to make about equal temperament and just intonation?
Yeah, so George mentioned the harmonic series. So basically, when we play notes on wind instruments, and I guess any instrument, it's not just one note you're hearing. It's there's a lot of overtones and undertones to those notes, and so that happens just naturally. And so we depend on that when it comes to tuning with others. So like George said on the piano, every note is equidistant from each other, and when we play our instruments, those notes aren't necessarily all equal. They have their own specific tuning characteristics. So when we play a note, naturally you'll also hear like overtones. So you'll hear the third and the fifth. You just won't necessarily actually hear them. But in nature, the third will be sharp and the fifth is going to be a little flat. So in order to be in tune with others when we're playing those notes, we just have to know that and know the specific intonation problems that every note has and really anticipate them before we play, so that we can be in tune rather than like fixing the problem after it happens.
All right. Thank you. All right. So, talking about how we play in tune with myself and others. So, Sam and Sawyer, y'all are talking about some tips for adjusting pitch and what it means to listen. Or, oops, sorry, I've made a small mistake. So, this is a summary of kind of what George and Sergio just talked to you about, that a lot of this is kind of ear training and listening. You've got to almost anticipate the third and the fifth, just when you're playing the third note in a scale of whatever your key signature is, just understand that it's naturally going to be a little bit sharp, so play it flatter. And you always have to be listening to your colleagues more than you yourself are playing. So if I come here, darn, that was the right slide. All right. Sorry, guys. Sam and Sawyer, can you talk about adjusting some pitch and listening in trios?
Yeah, so basically, it's a little bit of what you just said. There isn't much you can do in the moment if you aren't like if you are playing a trio and you notice that you're out of tune. First, you have to like understand what part you're playing. Are you playing a part that has a lot of tonic? Are you playing one that has a third or fifth or mixture of the both? Because you have to, like the slide says, you have to anticipate the third and the fifth. The third has to be flat, and the fifth has to be sharp. And the most important thing when playing with others is you have to be listening to them almost more than you are listening to yourself. If you can't hear them and understand how they're sounding and what they're playing, then there's a good chance that you'll be out of tune, along with a lot of other problems.
All right. Thank you. And Sawyer, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So for what Sam was saying, it's gonna take a little bit for you to actually be able to do all that stuff and understand what you're hearing, and put it together, kind of. So you shouldn't be discouraged if you can't like do it right away. So it's gonna take time, and don't be discouraged from practicing it.
All right. Thank you, Sawyer. Just big thing to remember, listen to other people. If it sounds bad, try something. If that makes it sound worse, try something else. A lot of this is trial and error, really listening, really trying to make sure that your pitch is matching with someone else. And with that said, have a good day and go work on intonation.